Zdravím, raz, dva, tri. Raz, dva, tri, test YouTube prekladu. Raz, dva, tri. To je taký 12 sekúnd. kanceláriu hneď vedľa, ja budem stále prítomný na hore. Možno si dať to za to, aby to bolo počne. A sú si možno aj. Primárne to bude fungovať takým spôsobom, že tu vlastne beží to streamovacie, to prekladateľské zariadenie. To znamená, že stačí len rozprávať, hej, a ten systém to vlastne zakoduje a posiela sa to na YouTube live video. A tu vlastne bude bežať tá prednáška, tam, kde vlastne bude po slovensky, po anglicky, čiže na to som vám donesol sluchátka, že aby ste počuli tú prednášku a rozprávali, vlastne stačí rozprávať iba do monitora a...
Takže odtiaľ to počúvam, sem rozprával.
Áno.
Super, ja som si to...
Toto sú tie papiere, ktoré
Dobre,
som si tlačil. Toto vás ešte potom poprosím teda o ten dohoda o tej vykonaní práce, všetky to podpisovanie, nejaká príklad dodatok, výklad a ešte nejaká prezenčná listina, čo je to ešte predtým, aby ste ich potom neutekli. A všetko by malo byť nastavené, to znamená, že ja som to včera testoval. Aj som to nastavil nejaké ľahké filtre, aby to tam bolo všetko OK.
Dobre, teraz sem som mal?
Nie by to malo byť, že...
Zamestnanca?
Asi áno, myslím si, že to môže. Ja už
Dobre.
nejako vymyslím. A teraz nejdeme mať ešte nejaká prezenčná listina. Ja to tu nechám zatiaľ, lebo neviem, že určite asi nejaká kópia pôjde aj vám. Dobre? Aby som to zbytočne nezabral všetko, aby ste potom nemali žiaden doklad. Dobre, tu máte tie papiere. No, situácia je taká teda, že myslím si, že ten začiatok vlastne, to asi budete počuť, že sa bude preberať, ako sa hlasuje teda o obvodoch univerzity, niekto bude skrutátor, či to všetko chce, či ten program sedí tak, že to bude univerzity, blablabla. A potom vlastne nastane tá situácia tej prednášky. Ten profesor na druhej strane má otvorený tento YouTubeový link, kde mu vlastne prekladá byť a zároveň má otvorený tú schôdzu. Čiže on vlastne do tej schôdze môže vstupovať priamo, len ju má akoby stiahnuť na obvod, teda dúfam, musím to teraz hovoriť. Čiže môže nastať situácia, že teda on do toho bude chcieť vstúpiť, povie po anglicky otázku a ten, kto obhajuje, začne po anglicky odpovedať. Ale on akoby netuší, že on ho nepočuje. Čiže ja sa chcel s vami dohodnúť, že keby ste to vedeli akoby v úvodzovkách akoby odpapuškovať, že to, čo sa povie po anglicky tam, že sa mu preloží, respektíve sa mu zopakuje do toho streamu, lebo on nejak inak vlastne nepočuje to, čo sa deje iba...
Tým, že je to stream, tak vlastne on nemôže vstupovať priamo do toho, on to počuje, vníma, ale...
On jediné, čo počuje, je to, čo vy hovoríte do monitora. To je jediné, čo počuje. To, čo sa deje vo vnútri, v tej miestnosti, čo budete mať na sluchátkach, on vôbec nebude počuť. Lebo by sa tam tie signály byli a bolo by to skreslené. Čiže tak sa to
dobre, a keď to znamená, keď sa streamuje na YouTube, to možno bude vidieť aj...
Nie, je to nastavené cez link, ten link je súkromný, ten link má iba on a ja, čiže tam budú vlastne papájať ľudia počúvať.
Ja si myslel, že... Aha,
nie.
Myslel, že sa...
Nie, toto je čisto len preklad pre jedného účastníka, čiže žiadny stream, to nič. Čiže toto by malo byť úplne v pohode. Len táto situácia zrejme môže nastať, že on ak položí nejakú otázku, tak ten, kto obhajuje, bude chcieť akoby odpovedať v angličtine, aby mu to uľahčilo, ale není to tak, že by mu to uľahčilo, že mu to proste budete musieť vy akoby retoricky znova povedať, lebo by ste jeho jediné uši, keď to mám tak povedať.
Takže ja sa to môžem. Jeho otázku potom zase povedať.
Tak. Čiže on do toho vstúpiť môže, ale nepočuje, čo sa deje vo vnútri. Čiže jedine počuje váš hlas, takže vy mu to ako keby musíte sprostredkovať to dianie vo vnútri do toho linku, lebo nejak inak sa nedozvie, čo sa tam deje.
Dobre. Oni sa teda, ak som to správne poznajú...
Áno, tam je klasicky to funguje tak, že teda sú vyzvaní pánom dekanom, teda aby prešli ďalšie budú hlasovania inauguračná prednáška, blablabla, tu rošíka. Následne on tam buď nahodí prezentáciu, alebo začne teda rozprávať. A vtedy vy môžete začať prekladať. Ak chcete, môžete na začiatku prekladať tie veci dohľadom toho hlasovania tých skrutátorov, ale to nie je podstatné, lebo on aj tak hlasovať nebude môcť. On hlasuje potom zase niekde úplne mimo. Takže tu je dôležitá len tá prednáška.
Dobre, on nám vlastne tú prezentáciu bude ukazovať, takže to
asi áno. Tá prezentácia pôjde tu a to isté uvidí aj ten pán profesor, len bez zvuku. To je tá vec, že vy ste vlastne, jak som spomínal, že jeho uši, lebo on by to mal mať stiahnuté.
Ja by som si presunul trošku.
Jasne. Môžem vám otvoriť tu na v druhom, treťom rade. Lebo chodia tu tie električky a keď som mal tu otvorené, tak to bolo také trošku nepríjemné, ale nič hrozného. Hej? Dobre.
Celkom náhodou ešte, už poviem zase na cestu na hovoru.
Jasne, samozrejme. Dobre, tuto máte teda na sluchatkách, toto je ten hovor, ktorý prebieha a potom stačí vám prekladať.
Dobre, a myslíte, že by som sa mohol s ním tak nejak, nie že pozdraviť, ale pozdraviť?
Jasné, kľudne mu povedzte, lenže on ako by vám nebude vedieť odpovedať nejak inak iba cez ten tým, kde sú vlastne všetci. Hej? Čiže môžete sa mu kľudne predstaviť, že zdravím budem vám teda prekladať dneska. Funguje to tak, že ja som vaše uši, vy ste teda pripojení do toho meetingu, že keď chcete odpovedať otázku, tak povedzte to v tom týme a ja vám následne ako budem prekladať všetko to, čo sa povie vnútri. Lebo ak by to mal mať správne nastavené, tak by vlastne nemal počuť nič. Donesiem vám to, to musím hovoriť na vás.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Ešte raz, keď ja teraz napríklad som sa chcel pozdraviť, poviem mu, že...
Nie, tunak do tohto nerozprávate, to je akoby tá vedecká rada. Hej? A primárne on sa má pripojiť do tejto vedeckej rady, čiže on uvidí to isté, ale má to mať stiahnuté, to znamená, že všetko to, čo počujete vy cez sluchátka, on nebude môcť počuť, aby sa tá slovenčina nekryla s tou angličtinou, ktorú mu prekladáte.
Dobre, viete čo, takto.
Či povedzte mi, že čo ste chceli urobiť, ja vám poviem, že
Či by som len mohol, alebo dobre, tak keď sa spustíme, tak ja ho začnem rovno tlmočiť, hej?
Môžete tak. Lebo oni primárne títo ľudia vôbec nemusia vedieť, že je nejaké tlmočenie, oni podľa mňa ani nevedia, že nejaké tlmočenie je. To znamená, že to je iba pre toho človeka tam na tej druhej strane.
Dobre, takže toto ide iba jemu.
Áno. Tak, v pohode. Hej? To znamená, že vy len sledujete toto dianie a hovoríte iba tomu jednému pánovi. Hej? Ešte to je len začiatok, čiže to ešte nemusíte kľudne.
A keby som priamo jemu chcel niečo povedať, tak nemôžem.
Komu? Tomu profesorovi?
Tomuto profesorovi.
Ale to nie je on. Nie on. Toto je akoby vedecká rada, čiže tam je 40 ľudí, 50 ľudí, ktorí akoby hlasujú, ale on ešte medzi nimi nie je.
Ja som myslel, že to je ten Rakúšan.
Nie. To je iný.
Dobre, takže počkám a potom začne.
Rainer.
Takže počkám, kým sa to začne ako tak oficiálna časť.
A môžete kľudne začať tlmočiť, lebo nemáte spätnú väzbu, že či on počuje, čiže treba akoby kľudne rozprávať, ako by tam bol na druhej strane, no a ja technicky riešim to, že aby sa tam teda technicky pripojil. Toto úplne vás vôbec nemusí zaujímať, tu bude len to dianie a vy mu to len tlmočte. To je všetko. No a potom ja sem dobehnem, keď sa skončí tá verejná časť a budem sa musieť prihlásiť do iného kanálu a tam to bude platiť úplne rovnako. Super. To je len také dianie tej vedeckej.
Ďakujem vám pekne.
Niečo tak mi kľudne zatelefonujte, alebo ja som hneď tu na kancelárii a zaklopte alebo niečo. Dobre?
Super. Ďakujem za vodu. Good morning. Let me welcome you on this session of Scientific Committee. Let me make this presence list. Now we hear participants to present themselves. This will take a while. This is just a repetition of who is present. The people who are excused. And now we continue. All the participants respond by saying present. as soon as the participants hear his or her name, it is enough to say, "I'm present, I'm here," or "yes." Now we shall proceed to composition of committee. We'll present the chairman, town meeting members. Now let's profesor večeře. OK, vidím. Ďakujem. I will proceed with the opponents. professors who read the work. That means that every member of the committee are present, as well as opponent. Now I give floor to just a little pause. I find out that we have present 37 members of the Scientific Council. 34 is enough. Some of the members said that they will come later. This means that I can say that we can proceed with the session, as well as inaugural committee. I welcome very warmly all of you, and I hereby open the session. And the first point is approval of the program. As far as approval of program, the program looks the same as it was informed. So I ask whether there is a proposal of the some changes. If not, it remains valid as it is. Point number 2 is approval of scrutators, which would be Mr. Vice Dean Škrobák and Mr. Vice Dean Blažo. I ask hereby whether there is a proposal for another scrutator. If not, that means I close the discussion on this point. And let's vote. I hereby ask the members of Scientific Council to vote about point number 1 and point number 2. That concerns only members of the Scientific Council. The election is secret. I myself deal with some technical issue here, so I will inform you later in a moment with more instructions. Now I'll ask all of the members whether they voted already. Were there any technical issues? I know about the Dean, which is being solved right now. Is there anybody else that is unable to vote? We have 32 to 34 votes. So that means we are 3 missing. It's necessary to vote on both 2 points. We have 34 votes for the first point and 32 votes for the second point. The platform for voting should be visible at the Teams interface with today's datum and both points 1 and 2. I ask whether there is somebody who needs to vote, but there could be some problem perhaps. Nobody? Okay, I hereby end the voting about the points 1 and 2. And I ask to present the results. So let me present these. About the point number 1, voted 34 for, 0 against. Point 2, 34 voted for, all of them against, 0. No one withdrew on the voting. Thank you. So I can say that these 2 were approved. Now we proceed to point number 2, which is the inaugural procedure for Assistant Professor Michal Turesik from Matej Bell University in Banská Bystrica, from the Institute of State and Law History. The inaugural lecture, I hereby give floor to the chair of the committee, Professor Nemec. Thank you for the word. Dear guests, dear all, dear members of the Scientific Council, dear guests, I've been given this function. I present the members of the committee: Professor Brstl, Professor Michael Reiner from the University of Salzburg, Professor Miloš Večeřa from the Masaryk University in Brno, Faculty of Law from Czech Republic. As for the opponents in this procedure is Professor Michal Skřejpek from the Charles University in Prague, Professor Ladislav Vojaček from the Masaryk University, Professor Robert Bertko from the Komenského University in Bratislava, Slovakia. The theme of today's inaugural lecture was the concept of obligation historical contribution of the Roman jurisprudence? This lecture will proceed pursuant to legislature in the case as is it required. Now follow the legislature and the laws according to which this procedure will proceed. As well as other legislations and regulations about the inaugural procedure and installment of professoral function. I hereby can say that the inaugurant has fulfilled the criteria necessary to apply for the professoral function. This conclusion was approved unequivocally that the applicant fulfills the criteria, all kinds of criteria, academic, personal. So the council recommends to continue in the procedure and to present the inaugural lecture. This decision was approved, and the result is today's lecture. Now I will present the applicants or the applicant. Sorry for the delay, the technical issues just happened. I hereby present the applicant, Assistant Professor Michal Turosík from the Faculty of Law at the Živé University in Banskej Bystrici. Within the theory and history of state and law, which is a course number 3.4.2. Mr. Turosík was born in 1986 in. Here comes the educational course. In 2009, he became a Doctor of Law in the years 2009 to 2011. He graduated in the engineering study in the public economics and services in the Maciej Bell University in Banská Bystrica. In these same years, he graduated from doctoral studies in the field of 342 State and Law Theory and History. In the years 2009 to 2013, doctoral studies in the field of Roman law at the Paris Lodron University of Salzburg in Austria. In 2017, habilitation in the field of state and law theory and history at the Komenského University in Bratislava. Another education, it was the course of education of university teachers in the field of university pedagogy in the year 2013. The course quality manager within the educational project of Maciej Bell University. That was in 2013 as well. So there's education of university teachers responsible for education management. This was in 2013 as well. As for the employment history, from September 2009 to June 2011, assistant at the Department of Theory of State and Law in Banská Bystrica. From July 2011 to February 2018, assistant at the same department. From July 2014 to February 2018, Vice Dean for International Relations and Development in Banská Bystrica as well. At the same time, he was the head of Department of Theory of State and Law. Same place. Since April 2018 to this day, he is an associate professor at this institution. Since February 2018 until this day, he is Dean of the Faculty of Law at the Maciej Bell University in Banská Bystrica. As for the pedagogic practice, he teaches compulsory subjects, Roman law, in ecclesiastical law and confessional law, as well Roman Foundations und römisches Recht mit Bezug auf das geltende Privatrecht, and Roman law and comparative law. In his research, he focuses on development of law of obligations and its development. He's a member of the editorial board of Studia Právno-ustrojowe in University of Varmia. Is a director of the Slovak Legal Research in Law School of Nanjing Normal University. Member of the Scientific Board of the Faculty of Law in Bratislava. As well as members of several further editorial boards. And member of several scientific boards. And member of the scientific board in Banská Bystrica. In 2017, he was awarded Prize for the Scientific and Professional Literature in the category of Social Sciences for the work Some Theoretical Aspects of the Roman Contract of Sale. As for the publications, he He's authored 3 monographs in foreign publishing houses, 2 in German language. Further on, in Slovak, 2 Slovak publishing houses, a handbook published in Slovak. There are 70 items in his publicational register, which can be characterized as follows. Now follows the overview over these 70 research items according to categories. As for the responses, 101 feedbacks, be it reviews or other citations. As well as foreign and Slovak conditions. And one PhD student who successfully graduated, and one ongoing student, PhD student. Now we proceeded to the part where I shall give floor to Professor Michal Turošík with his inaugural lecture, which would be about 20 minutes. Then will be discussion, place for questions, opponents, and then answers to opponents' questions, and then I will open the open discussion. So I give the floor is yours, Mr. Assistant Professor Turošík. The time has come for your lecture. Now it's okay, now we can hear you. Dear Chairman and dear members, opponents, members of the Scientific Council, and dear guests, it is a great honor to me that I'm able to present this lecture at this place where Peter Blau and some others have worked. I would like to start with a sentence by Revero and Blau that it is a historical contribution of Romans that they created of the concept of obligation. I would like to present a hypothesis about these Roman lawyers, and I will give acknowledgement to these Slovak scholars, Rebro and Blau. The main hypothesis for this lecture would be the Roman lawyers have created the concept of obligation as a result of continual genesis in three phases. A partial question for this hypothesis: which of these possibilities of a Gaius dichotomical divisions was at the beginning of the obligation definition? And the aim of this lecture is in what consists the historical contribution. I will speak about three phases in this creation. The first phase is the phase of responsibility. The concept of obligation is connected to the etymological base of the league, something that is bound. This etymology may be surprising. We can also find, perhaps surprisingly, in the concept of religion, or the word league. The German Roman scholar Otto Behrens from University of Göttingen, and the pupil of has in his known work, claims that the concept of obligation is a result of a long evolution, and it is false to believe that such a developed institute can be present in these ancient times. In these times, the situation in this the law in this area was mainly concerned with family issues, but there were situations where there was necessary to be concerned with criminal activities. And if a person had to face the consequences of its wrongdoing above the frame of pater familias, and if this individual trespasses his frame, he becomes responsible. This is the concept of responsibility. An issue is in this period was a weak state. There was not too much force to enforce sanctions, and therefore the wrong done party had to take justice in his own hands. So the result was an individual vengeance of the party suffering. But this individual vengeance, resulting sometimes even in the death of the wrongdoer, was not very positive and not satisfying. The first step towards to moderate this procedure was the Talionization, known ever since the Hammurabi Code, as well as in Old Testament. Based on this principle, it was possible to inflict on the wrongdoer the same damage he had inflicted upon the party suffering. It means the same, the easy principle, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. It may sound cruel, but compared with the previous situation where the wrongdoer could end up being killed, this was a step forward. Interesting is what Davis claims, just a curiosity, who claims that he sees this as the source of law itself, not just a source of obligation. The role of state in this was to regulate the vengeance, so that the vengeance does not become a means of communication. And the goal is to achieve a regulated social interaction. Nevertheless, this was still a crude ways of social communication. And there is another possibility of how to perceive involvement, obligation as a concept, which is claimed the law is not a system but a living force. The lecturer E. Helling describes the role of law in a very interesting way. Characterizes the role of state during the development of obligation concept. In the following publication, he claims that the law that ever seen before the table of 12, the state awaited this justice to be fulfilled. We'll follow to the next step in the development, which would be the 12 tables from 450 before Christ. The main contribution was the standardization of sanctions in case of wrongdoing. It is clear that the wrongdoer sought ways how to not be punished. Here we can find the sought how to moderate and to become more mild in the eyes of the law. And he was willing to sacrifice his property. On the other side, not every wrong done party was content with the idea that he should inflict his something that later became the basics of all jurisprudence. We speak about concrete offers, or even third persons offered compensations for which should prevent from execution of the sanction. The fact that Romans accepted these agreements or welcomed such agreements, the best example of this is the 12 tables. Where the death penalty was given only in some cases, not very often. When the victim suffered a broken leg, there was a chance of choice. So it was not necessary an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. If the party suffering was offered compensation, he can act accordingly to this. So the party suffering decided upon the how much he or she will receive in compensation. So the vengeance was gradually replaced by material compensations, but liability in this period meant that the party suffering was given jurisprudence over the wrongdoer. It is necessary to note that pay or a compensation is not a typical contractual liability, but only a way to escape persecutions or physical sanctions. Now we can mention the third as far as the third it is about the manum repellere procedure. According to this procedure, if the ransom was not paid, the plaintiff had to present the sum. If this sum was not paid, the debtor could be sold to slavery. If there were several creditors, each of them could cut a piece of debtor's body, which is kind of cruel and inhuman acting with the debtor, and the personal debtor was replaced in 326 Lex Petelia replaced this cruel use. Now we proceed to the second phase, the phase of duty. This seems like a good way how to enforce, to make the other person act accordingly to the agreement. And here is the beginning of the contractual liability. Can mention Josef Slavíček from Prague produced about the Roman law, interesting book about the Romulo, where he points out that in the ancient Rome law, we find remnants of this blood vengeance, as well as other elements. There were penalties which can be paid either by free will or enforced. The wrongdoer had to accept these second penalties, and the Romans realized one fact: if such a way of dealing with injustice, it is possible to create a pressure on this person, to both wrongdoer and party suffering. Why not to use this model in any case, in any circumstances, in all occasions? So it was kind of widening of the elementary, of the basic original model. A person became obliged. Dear members of the Scientific Council and all guests, in this moment we proceed to the phase of duty. The first forms was the acts of obligations. Should somebody be forced to do something, he was subjected to this person. Similarly as with the delict, he can redeem himself when he fulfilled the agreement. This was an artificially created liability created by ex lege. The original acts in this period was the nexum used by loan or other relationships, legatum per damnationem, or solutio per es et libram. Similar effects as these acts was the official oath called sponsio or stipulatio. This was a remarkable move, a development in this obligational relationship. The debtor was not automatically entitled to property of the debtor. Remarkable Czech scholars Kincl, Urkus and Skrzepek found out that with respect to this, the relationship moved from the personal guarantee to contractual or obligational fulfillment. So it was based more on free will, which functioned as prevention, also towards the future. And the result of this analysis, I would say, it is in this very moment here, in this phase, we can seek the creation of today's obligation, where the first thing was to motivate the debtor to fulfill his commitment. The first phase and the last phase was the obligational phase. It's a logical result of the previous two phases. This was based on a simple principle called 1 + 2 is 3. It is a result the debtor is obliged to fulfill his commitment, otherwise he will be punished. We'll find in this fragment of Institutes 3.13 Obligation, this definition, famous, is obligation is a legal bound according to which we are obliged to fulfill some kind of duty or performance, render performance. Professor Kaiser considered this definition to be very peculiar, and it needs to be analyzed. Another scholars claim that juris vinculus had not only the legal meaning but also a moral meaning with respect to concepts as solidarity. Another part of this definition refers to the law of civitas. Hereby it can be meant the civil law, which was not very elastic. We can even conclude that this was a counterpart to the contractual liability. The last part of this definition speaks about the duty to fulfill something. Professor Kaiser claims that this needs to be understood extensively. This opens for other fulfillments, and not only via money, but also services and presentations. This definition is not a result of classical legal thinking, but an aftermath of previous times where obligation meant that the debtor, the creditor, exerted power over the debtor's body and person. We can mention the metaphorical dimension of this obligation, where the debtor was literally bound by physical chains or bonds or cuffs. This became more metaphorical, which is very important. Later, this became invisible chains and invisible bond. We can mention the relativity, the concept of relativity. Which meant that the debt died with the debtor, so to say. Especially in trade transactions. The nature of obligations is defined by Paulus in the 44th book. The substance of obligation does not lie in that some kind of thing become ours, that somebody is forced to give us something or to do us something or guarantee us something. This is the very nature or the substance of obligation. These concepts had not aimed to provide a very detailed definition. became more archetypes of fulfillment. If we want to analyze Paul's fragment, he describes the basic differences between the Roman this is difference described. It's kind of complicated. But it suffices to say that the Roman law was concerned mainly with property. We can proceed to conclusions. The above-mentioned characteristics the liability mentioned that there is a connection between the wrongdoing or acting against the law and the delict. So the definition of obligation was connected to the concept of contract. The main contribution of Roman jurisprudence was that they elaborated a very general, systematical and detailed concept of obligation, which is the very achievement and credit of Roman lawyers. And this means the quality of legal regulations. Where there was regulations concerned both with the absolute and relative property laws. And despite the lack of formalism in today's understanding, the Romans knew the majority of institutes that are known today. And they even managed to create a detailed system of these institutes, legal institutes. This was unprecedented in the contemporary times, but was even unparalleled by the later institutes. I would like to compare this to Roman statutes. The concept of obligations was a unique contribution to world's jurisprudence. So I can conclude hereby that the concept of obligation is most definitely the historical contribution of Romans to the law. We can admire this contribution and achievement and can be inspired by this. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you very much for applicant. Thank you for your lecture. Now we continue with discussion, which is open to everybody. Please use this hand icon, which you can see in the lower section of the interface. Assistant Professor Fabri, thank you very much. Thank you for an interesting lecture. I would like to ask one thing. The concepts used, obligation, responsibility, do they have the basis in some religious systems they're based in religious systems. There was some important was the idea that the God is present all the time and everywhere. When this secularization took place of these concepts like duty, responsibility, and obligation, when did this happen? We can answer right away. Well, the role of religion in this development, I believe there was some kind of role, given that obligation and religion have a share in this word base, the base lig, which means to be bound, either to state or to the God. Individual cases where the religion was used we can mention one of the oldest charges that that was made. Another important phase this was lost in translation. If someone made an oath, it was said that he calls God as a witness. Another example of religion, a certain religious symbolicism. We face some technical issues. Okay, so I can move. Certain religious symbolism can be seen in the numbers that were used in legal circumstances. In Bible, numbers played a significant role, where the magic of number 3. Similarly, Justinianus accentuated of number symbolic. There are 4 reasons on how to create obligation. We have 4 contracts, 4 kinds of contracts. The number 4 had a magical or symbolical meaning, a numerical symbolism of these concepts. There was another thing, the combination of 3 plus 4. So he used 4 instead of 3, which was reserved to Bible and God. And the number 3 was sacred. 4 times 3 is equals 12, which was another sacred number. So the religious symbolism is there, most definitely. Professor Bartko. Good day. Thank you very much for an interesting lecture. I would like to ask 2 domains. First, your view on what is the meaning of the study of obligation law in Roman law for today's legal education and jurist education? And what about the meaning of Roman lawyers? We say Roman law is or is not created by Roman lawyers. There were no legislators, but they analyzed legal norms because they were given a right to do so. Which means that they created law in a certain way. I would like to ask about the principle of utilitas, which they managed to compose into obligations of Roman law. That's about it. Thank you very much for the questions. Well, what is the meaning of studying these ancient legal systems? I believe the meaning is there. It is very important because I consider the Roman obligational law to be one of the most developed and elaborated and sophisticated systems that there are. Is the most perfect of Roman private law. And most institutes, Roman institutes, was further incorporated in legal systems until this day. The meaning is, in first place, is the propedeutical meaning. Students became acquainted with basic concepts. The proof is that we can prove that by saying that we can see it that Roman law is being educated at the private law schools, not only in state schools, especially in the domain of Roman obligations. Well, Roman lawyers had tremendous meaning in development of contractual law. Paulus or Gaius, most respectable lawyers, made some important distinctions, divisions between the contracts and delicts. Gaius was, we can name him intelligent and self-reflective, because he found out that it is necessary to create further divisions, so he elaborated his original division into 4 concepts of liability. The main contribution is that they worked on certain individual cases. I can mention a Greek professor Theophilus, who claimed that the obligation is a mother of all charges, especially when it comes to casuistics, the case law. This was an indirect description of Roman obligations. Well, that's about it for my part. Dear Professor Rainer, the floor is yours. You can. Professor Rainer, you can pose your question now. By first unmuting yourself. Okay.
Viete mi prosím povedať, že nech si dá ten mikrofón?
Yes, you can hear me. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. So, what is the importance of comparatistics? I mean, the importance is tremendous. The Roman law is a common European ancestry or legacy, which this further which the further European laws are based upon. And this is also a basis for legal comparatistics, which today, legal comparative studies today is a is an individual, self-defined branch of inquiry. I see possibilities for new legislation. When we work and approve a new, to create new law, we can always be inspired by this Roman legacy, and it's a historical method, and also by using comparative method, and using these tools we can implement regulations and institutes into our new legislators. We will know how they function, what impact do they have. We can mention just a very intuitive example in Czech Republic, where there are many Roman institutes and principles and rules were renewed in the new civil code from 2012 and effective from 2014. I will just mention some typical that are known to all. It is a comparative discussion. And this is being inspired is something that we still need to do in Slovakia, but which is already done in Czech Republic. It is an example of the institute of so-called abrogation, also inspired by the Roman system, or even negation or denial of the original institutes, like example mentioned. And this regulation was made in contrast to the original Roman version in Czech Republic, where Czech legislators were inspired by French legal system and the concept of translative effects of contracts, which can even be perceived as creating a certain uncertainty when signing the contract. So I agree upon something that I do not see. In all these cases we can use legal comparative studies and Roman law in order to identify the original source of institute and to identify impacts of such institute in concrete lives. Even with respect to individual particular conditions, be it national, geographical, political, or historical. Yes, that will be just my question. Next is Professor Vachok. Thank you very much. I would like to tie in on the previous question or answer. Today we face a weak enforcement force. There are plenty of decisions where we have moral winners from the side of creditors, but without real fulfillment. What would you say? What do we do wrong? What should we improve to improve the enforcement capacity? I know that this is easier to ask than to answer. So, a brief answer. It is a nice challenge, though. The problem is not only the enforcement capacity, but also obstructions, delays in the procedures. How to deal with how this was dealt in Roman time? I have to say, for the adherents of positive law, this would not be acceptable, but I liked very much the Roman effectiveness of the Roman procedure, where in such cases, where there was two phases of enforcement. In the first phase, before the praetor, but not before the judge. In this first phase, many conflicts were solved even before they got before the judge, which made it much more easy. So this meant a certain filtration of cases. Praetor looked upon whether there are formal features which are fulfilled. Are there any ways how to solve this? So this meant that in effect, this led to confessio in iure. So the judge only dealt with real cases. It was also to make a deal, transactio, beyond the court. It was possible to make agreement. So in these cases, conflict ended before the praetor, and the judge only dealt with cases that were unsolvable by praetor. Only with cases that fulfilled the requirements for a relevant case, be it formal and material. And this created a respectable efficiency with delays in legal procedure or procedure before the court. And this concerned also the enforcement capacity. The enforcement capacity in ancient times was very good, because it concerned not only property of the delinquent, but the delinquent's person himself or herself. So there was nowhere to run. So the delinquent became subject of execution, decision execution. Later, this was replaced by enforcement via property. But I believe the most important aspect when it comes to enforcement is this efficiency, which was introduced by praetors. Thank you very much. So there is a place for one last questions. Would anybody like to ask someone? Now we can proceed to the next stage, next step, which would be the opponent's opinions. So I'd like to first ask Professor Šejpek to present essential parts of his opinion. Thank you for your from your opinion. I believe it is unnecessary and impossible to repeat all the parts and information presented by the chairman of the committee. I would focus on two domains. The first domain is the amount of citations that Docent Turashik was able to collect, which is a superhuman effort, according to me. When we speak about humanities and these domains, to become cited in humanities can become accidental, more or less. It happens that it is also a work of accident. And the second point I'd like to mention, since Professor Reiner is present here, to graduate as a PhD student in foreign country and under provision of such a respected scholar as Professor Reiner is also quite unique. My remark concerns the fact that I know the applicant very well, and it's not so surprising given that there are not so Roman law scholars in our countries. Because I know Turashik very long and good, and I can consider our communication as meetings. We meet regularly at conferences in Slovakia and Czechia. We met at his dissertation thesis, which I supervised. I was gladly to supervise. I am very glad that we can meet today again as well in his inaugural lecture, inaugural procedure. And I do not doubt that he deserves this title. I like the way of how he managed his inaugural lecture and how he profiled it. Concludingly, I can say that I'm fully for the decision that he will be given a professorial title. Thank you very much. Now, Professor Voracek. I could begin with, Professor Skrzypek. My stance is based on the contact with Professor Turashik, as well as with personal contacts with him. This we already heard. I begin by saying that Professor Turashik is a man of a wide scope of ambitions and organizational talent. This can be proven by facts from biography. I would only like to remind that I pointed to a peculiarity of his university preparations, be it in Slovakia and foreign countries as well. I would like to remind also his large network of contacts, also in Slovakia, and foreign contacts, which also concerns our Faculty of Law, our own. As for the publications, I accentuated, he tries to confront Roman law regulation with today's legal regulations, and I couldn't not notice unnoticed that some of his foreign publications concern legal historics or legal history. And eventually I have to say that apparently satisfied, and he is glad in organizing things, which can be proved by functions, his organizatorial functions at faculty, but also in editorial practice and issuing of legal journals. Based on these facts, I came to the conclusion that Professor Turoshi will be awarded by this installment, and he will. Yeah, and I will proceed with the third opinion by Professor Bartko. I would similarly like to. I will not repeat the statistical measures and informations that are already mentioned here. I divided my opinion in several parts: in qualification, presuppositions, pedagogical activity, scientific and research activity. I know Dr. Turoshik since many years now. As for his pedagogical activities, I would like to evaluate or accentuate that to a substantial degree he used information from his scientific and research activity. He was able to connect these two domains of activity. I would like to accentuate his natural pedagogical talent and rhetorical talent, where the applicant or inaugurant is able to present certain issues quite complicated in a very accessible way, an understandable way, a comprehensive way. I would also like to point at, in respect to pedagogical and rhetorical domain, at various conferences and meetings, he was always able to pose a good question and a relevant question. He was able to pick the right question and a very direct question. As far as the scientific activity, I would like to point at that his research concerns or mainly focuses on two detailed domains. The first one is the development of obligatory law, as we saw in the inaugural lecture, and the second domain would be the issue of impact of Roman property law on today's civil law. I would also like to point out the high level of his publications. This is proven by 2007 degree or size, a prize. And I can also point out international dimension of his research, apart from and his active collaboration with professors, foreign professors, and respected, renowned professors as Professor Reiner, present now. I take the liberty of greeting him. Only few know that Professor Reiner is a Roman. He's a Roman ancestors, and he works in Austria. I would also like to accentuate collaboration with Professor Skrzepek. These are scholars of European importance, or Professor Alexander Mario Varino from Italy. So the international dimension aspect of his research is very palpable and fulfilled. Concludingly, after evaluation of all aspects, I came to the conclusion that Assistant Professor Turoshik is a profiled research personality and researcher. So without any doubt, I recommend the Scientific Council to approve his application for professorial title, professorial function. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask applicant to reply to opponents' opinions. So, what's your attitude stance towards opinions consecutively? Thank you very much. I can only think that for these words that I'm not only glad because of them, and affected me in a positive way because they affected my personality. All opponents that expressed words that every person which is dealing with research in this area desires to hear, and especially if these words come from such respected scholars with whom I have to honor to collaborate. So if you allow me to, I only concludingly will respect this until my whole life. This is not something automatic. Even more, that these are words that are based on not only based on studying publications or works on bibliography, but also based on personal experience and meetings and collaborations during all these years on various conferences. In each and every aspect of this activity. I thank you very much and appreciate it so much. I will now ask one last time if there is a person who would like to pose a question. Now is the place to do it. If not, we will continue as planned. Please use the hand icon if you wish to pose the question. I don't see any. I hereby end this discussion. Oh, pan profesor Reiner. Professor Reiner, you can pose your question now. Yes, yes. I hereby end the discussion and thanks to all the questions, as well as to opponents and their opinions. But before I give word to applicant, I have to say that now the committee, we will move to a certain channel, communication channel, where the session of scientific board, scientific council will continue. I just have to react on words to Professor Reiner, which I used to thank you once more, because behind all these international activities and the roots of this international activity, these roots lie in Salzburg in Austria. Thanks to the fact that right in the beginning of my career, he always supported me, as well as others that are present in this procedure, in this inaugurational procedure. I always felt support from his side, and that I can count on that in this international domain, international milieu, thanks to his knowledge and his contacts, I will not become lost, and I appreciate it very, very much. Another thing is that the motivation to continue forward, to not retreat, to do everything I can in order to, so that my public and my Slovak and foreign activity is meaningful. Therefore, once again, thank you for these words and support. Now I can believe I can conclude the discussion. We will move to another channel. Do we have a certain channel? Yes. We will now end this meeting, and we shall move to second second channel. If there will be problems with connecting to the second channel, just call us and we will try to help you with the technical issue. So now the step is to end this call and to move the second channel to the narrow channel. Thank you very much. That was the point 2. We will now wait to originally there was 37 members. Now we are at 39. Members present. That means that is enough. We'll now move to next point, the point 3, the procedure for Wait. Yeah.
Tu sa jeden čas a potom tu.
Okay, now is the non-public part. I hope that, yeah, we managed to move from one virtual place to another. We now wait for Professor Večera. Professor Robert, yeah. So now we are all present here. The aim of this meeting, this part of the meeting, is to evaluate whether the conditions were met and fulfilled according to given legislator. We have the publicational activity of applicant, and we shall vote about the proposal, so that which later will be presented at the session of which later be presented at a session of scientific board. So each and every one should express him or herself. So we can start with Professor Reiner. Whether you agree or do not agree with installment, or his stance and attitude from your side. But we see you. Professor Reiner, you can present your stance, your attitude towards the applicant, and Now we move over to Michal. We stay in a foreign country. I will not repeat what I already said during the scientific council. I believe that there are not so many good, there is never enough good Roman scholars, pedagogues, teachers, and researchers. Professor Vojacek, I will be even briefer. The lecture only confirmed what we already know, so I will vote yes. Professor Večera, I fully tie on to positively stands towards to. I'm very fully positive towards this proposition, and Professor Bristol, every requirement has been fulfilled, so I'm positive about the proposal. So everything is all right. Now, Professor Bertko. So just to formally conclude, I will use words of Pilatus. What I have written, I have written. And I only can agree with what was said. The requirements were met and fulfilled. So that will be all from my side. I myself share this position, of course. So this is the basis for conclusion, for a decision, which will be a basis for scientific council. I will now read the proposal, how it will look like, this proposition. This will be read now. So the applicant fulfills the criteria for be given the title professor from all required aspects. Then follows the proposal based on opinions, based on lecture. The committee will approve the proposal, but this relies solely on voting, which will take place now. Now we shall explain the procedure of voting. On the left, well, now comes the technicality. I will try to share the screen so that you can have in this moment, you have a screen and our call. It is necessary to minimize the screen by using the icon minus. Then you will see the interface of Microsoft Teams, where they're up. You can see the voting ticket. After clicking to this voting ticket, voting box will be opened. So click on this button. You can now click on the icon that you see. So just click on the icon with the name of Turoshik. It should work. I don't know. There are two technical issues. One that succeeded, two succeeded. If it does not seem to work, you can ask our IT technician, and he will send you a reminder especially for you that you can only need to click on, so it will be easier. Just make a sign. Hopefully it will be okay. The question was posed whether you already have. Okay. You will get a call from Labuda, from Mr. Labuda, which will assist you with the technical issue. Okay. Now we have the results. There was seven votes, all correct and controlled. So all agreed, none refuted. So number of present is 7, number of positive 7, number of negative 0, number of non-valid 0. With this result I can continue to the Scientific Council. Dear members of the committee, the result is, as you heard, unequivocal. 7 positive, 7 present, 0 negative, 0 non-valid. So this means that the proposal can be now completed and concluded. So based on the position of committee and based on this session as described in protocol, as well as based on the presented inaugural lecture, presented by Assistant Professor Turosik, which had the title of Roman Law. The committee recommends to install Turosik as a professor in the field of theory and history of state and law. Now we can click on to now we should cancel this call and leave this special room with the red button in the right upper corner. And then register in this new, this old meeting room.
Ja len si prepojím do toho vyhlásenia a to vyhlásenie a tým pádom už je potom, dobre, potom všetko.
Ja by som si potom rýchlo odskúšal.
Jasne, ja si rozumiem, máte toho rozumiem, že máte toho trošku. Dobre.
Ja ešte skontrolujem, že ten pán sa tam pozrie.
OK. Ďakujem. Jasné. We will now continue with point number 6, inauguration process of Michal Turošík. I give floor to the chairman, Professor Němec, so that he can present us the results of the voting. Thank you very much, Dean. The results of protocol follows. The area is presented. The inauguree, Michal Turošík, with his theme of inaugural lecture, which took place at 9 September at 9 o'clock, online version. Voting of the committee, number of members entitled 7, numbers present 7, number of positive voices 7, number of negative voices 0, number of invalid votes 0. This means that unequivocally being approved that Michal Turošík, applicant for the professorial function, professor title, fulfills the criteria necessary to gaining this title in all categories and in all aspects. All pedagogical, scientific and personal requirements have been fulfilled. Based on several points, based on opponent opinions, based on inaugural lecture, which took place today, it is recommended to approve this proposal. In the theory and history of state and law. Thank you very much, Chairman. You conclude that all regulations have been followed, valid for Comenius University, as well as other regulations have been met. So nothing stands in the way to proceed to voting. As for this point, I open a discussion. I believe that this was a very exquisite lecture. One of those lectures that which would motivate one to address such an inauguree with a proposal whether you like to work for our institution. It was an excellent lecture indeed, and I would like to thank all opponents and members of the scientific committee, as well as Professor Reiner deserves a well-deserved thanks because this cooperation has been very fruitful. But I will not waste your time. Became usual that the inauguree does not vote. Naturally, I will withdraw withheld my vote. If there are no further questions, I hereby end the discussion, and I will ask you to vote about the proposal about point number 6. You can proceed to voting. It is necessary to scroll screen upwards. There are 39 present and 38 voters of scientific committee that will give the vote. We have 34 votes as for now. That means that is enough. If there is someone that struggles with the process of voting, please let us know. The votes are now 35 in number. Okay, I suppose that we Dear Chairman, as for this point number 6 in the program, there were 35 votes. 4 were 35 members of the scientific committee. No one was against and no one withdrew. So hereby I give my gratulations to Michal Turosik. Congratulations as well. And thank you very much for all participants of this session, all the members of scientific members. And now I give the floor, the concluding floor, to Michal Turosik. I would like to sincerely thank to you, Mr. Chairman, so that I can be here and initiate this procedure. I thank all the members of scientific committee, and I also thank you. I would like later to thank all of this inaugurational committee, thank him via phone and personally. I really appreciate all your support and all the words that we heard here today, and I will look forward to cooperation in future in whatever form. And I also hope that the future cooperation will be very good, and I will thank you all. I'm also looking forward to a future cooperation, and thank you to all the participants, and I wish all the good, and congratulations. Even now it is a pause. Thank you. Thank you and bye. I see. Yes. Ďakujem. Môžem si najprv odskočiť. Tunak naľavo, hneď tie prvé dvere.